Check, check. All right. Good evening. We're going to get started. We want to be very thoughtful, effective, and efficient with everyone's time. Quick introductions. I just want to let you know who I am and a couple of our other board members who are here today. My name is Casey Kocourek, and I have the honor and pleasure of serving as the superintendent here at the district. I'm currently in my 8th year as the superintendent here. I want to thank you for taking the time to come out and learn more about the proposed project. In case of an emergency, which we will hopefully not have happen, we can exit the auditorium to your front right and your front left, and also 2 exits. Most of you came in this back door. There's also a door there. So God forbid we have a reason to get out of here quickly. We will be able to do that, and then we can work from there. But hopefully that's not the case. So once again, Casey Kocourek, Superintendent of Schools. I'm momentarily going to turn it over to our Assistant Superintendent for Business, Mr. Adam Geist. But before we get started, I just want to recognize our Board of Education members who are here. So I do see Stephanie Sloan, Mark Hilberger, Marianne Chafee, Brian O'Connor. We also have Therese Flannery and Nancy Pickering, and we may have Ed Muscadri who has come in. But just, there you are, Ed, thank you. So just a round of applause for our Board of Education. Thank you so much for being here today. All right, and at this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Adam Geist, our Assistant Superintendent for Business. Thank you. Thanks.
All right, thank you everybody for coming out. As Dr. Kocourek said, my name is Adam Geist. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Business. I've been with the district now for going on 20 years. So I've been through many capital projects, but obviously none like what I'm going to be sharing with you tonight. So before we get into the presentation, I just want to kind of go over the format that we're going to use for tonight because we do have quite a large group, so that's great. Really appreciative that people want to come out and learn about the capital projects. So I'm going to go through the presentation. I'm anticipating it's going to take about an hour to get through. Then we're going to take a little bit of a break, probably about 10 to 15 minutes. We're going to have some administrators who are going to be walking around. If you have a question that you would like to ask, they're going to give you a card. That card is going to look like this. It'll have kind of 4 categories on it. We broke it down from scope of the project, financing, timeline and construction, and then district-specific or other miscellaneous questions. I would ask that you keep 1 question per card. If you need multiple cards, we'll get you multiple cards. But just so that we can keep it efficient and make sure that we're answering all of the questions, that would be much appreciated. Also, if it's specific to one of the 2 propositions, there are 2 propositions that we're going to be talking about tonight, just indicate this is related to Proposition 1 or this is related to Proposition 2. And that will help us, again, coordinate and answer the questions. At the very end, what we'll do is we will have this group, which they will be introducing themselves momentarily. We will have them in kind of groups where if you have a specific question related to any one of those 4 categories, you could talk to our financial consultants, you could talk to our architects, you can talk to our construction manager, or you could talk to somebody who is here at the district. So at the end, if you have a specific question that wasn't answered or you thought of something after the fact, feel free to come up and take that time to speak directly with those individuals. So at this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Kristen Polini introduce herself. This mic.
Good evening, although I don't know if I need to introduce myself anymore. I'm Kristen Polini still, Assistant Superintendent for Instruction. Thank you for coming out this evening.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Girizzi. I'm the Director of Physical Education and Athletics.
Good evening. I'm Mark Edwards. I'm the Director of Buildings and Grounds. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Gary Hoffman, and with Campus Construction Management Group, we represent the district as the construction manager.
I'm Jared Miller, also with Campus Construction Management Group.
Michael Skill, Labella Associates with the District Architect.
Eric Stender from Labella Associates, Project Manager and Architect.
Megan Friedel from Labella Associates, Civil Engineer.
Carly Mastrodonato from BPD Finance.
And Melissa Kirkland from BPD Finance, the district's financial advisor.
Okay, so we now have the introductions done. We'll get into the presentation. And maybe we'll get into the presentation. Let's try technology. There we go. All right, hopefully the rest of this will go without a hitch, but we will pivot if we need to. So we are going to go over the overview that we used to get kind of where we are and the process that was used to bring both these projects forward. We'll talk about the different project components, so all the scope of work that's going to take place both for Proposition 1 and Proposition 2, and then we'll talk about the financing for both of those propositions as well. So I am not controlling. I'm going to need some help, Dan. Thank you. All right, so the Capital Project Planning Committee was formed in January of 2022. This is a board-level committee. We often refer to it as our long-range planning committee. And really it was set out with the goal of developing a recommendation to go to the Board of Education for their approval, looking at the district's most compelling facility needs. And we use that through the lens of 9 subcommittees that were part of the capital project planning process. So those subcommittees included a representative from the high school, a representative from Merton Williams, from Northwood, Village Elementary, Quest Elementary, our athletic department, which is for district-wide, the transportation department, our food service department, and our technology department. On these committees, they are comprised of these subcommittees are comprised of teacher leaders and head custodians, bus drivers, mechanics, network technicians, coaches, other community members that were affiliated with particular buildings, participated in each of the subcommittees, but may not have participated in the full long-range planning committee. So the starting point for any of our capital projects is what's called the Building Condition Survey. Every year, or every district has to go through a building condition survey once every 5 years. So for us, this began in 2005. We went through that process. We did that again in 2010. We did that again in 2015. And then in 2019, the state changed the rules. And they changed the rules, and I think it was actually for the better. They decided to stagger the districts across the state. So about 20% of the schools had to do a building condition survey, but those happened every year. So we were falling to the end of that, so that began in 2020. And then we weren't scheduled to go forward with that building condition survey until 2024. So it was almost a decade after our 2015 building condition survey. And when we looked at that, we said we couldn't wait until going through that next round of a building condition survey to put forth the capital project. We had too many needs that we needed to address. So basically, the building condition survey is performed by a licensed architect who basically walks every square inch of our buildings, inside and out. And they're looking at things like the major systems. So they're looking at our roofs, they're looking at our boilers, they're looking at HVAC equipment, they're looking at pavement needs, and they're looking at it from the lens of what is past its useful life and needs to be replaced, what is something that might be energy inefficient, and if it was upgraded would provide energy efficiencies, and what is something that is focused on the safety and security of the system or the building or its occupants. So that's really the lens that was used for the building condition survey. So these are the members that were on the long-range planning committee. They served on there. There's about almost 30 members up there. As I said, this is a board-level committee, so we had board members that participated in this group, we had community members, we had administrators, and then we had individual representation from our partners and consultants at Campus Construction, Labella Architect, and BPD Finance. And many of the people that served on this committee also served on the subcommittees. We actually had an individual who actually served on all 9 of the subcommittees, including the Long Range Planning Committee. So we had good representation, and they got to see kind of the process from start to finish. So those subcommittees took the information that came off of that 2015 building condition survey, the last one that we had completed, and they looked at the items that were pertinent to their respective areas. So the high school subcommittee looked at the items obviously for the high school and so on and so forth for the committees. And they took those and they prioritized them and they ranked them from their perspective, from the most need from their perspective to the least need. And but they also brought in instructional initiatives that maybe the architect, as they walked around, wouldn't have even known exist. So, for instance, if we have a new instructional program or needed a new classroom for something, the architect's not going to know that when they're going around and looking at it. But these subcommittees who are living this day in and day out, they will know it. So they received input from the staff, from the students, and they took what they knew from their respective buildings and departments and added items to the list for the building condition survey. So we took all of those. Those are the subcommittee bullet points up in the BCS on the far right, and then to the left of that was some of those other additional items that were added in, and they ranked it from their perspective, all of those items, and then presented out to the Long Range Planning Committee. So the Long Range Planning Committee got to hear the rationale behind everything that was proposed. And there was a lot of great items proposed, but we drew a line kind of where our budget was, and that's how we determined what the scope for this project was going to be. So this is what it ended up by building. You could see that the total project was about $37.2 million. It impacted all 5 of our buildings, plus the athletic department, the transportation department, and district-wide technology. Now, one of the subcommittees that I mentioned, which was food service, was not on this list because their item got bundled in with one of the buildings, and I'll touch on that once we get into the actual scope items. So these costs that you're seeing here are estimated costs. These are projections, and it's all inclusive. So this is taking into account design contingency, construction contingency, incidental costs, including borrowing costs. It's taking into account escalation for when the actual construction will take place and the potential change in cost that would go into that construction. So now this is specific to Proposition 1. This is kind of the timeline we use, and this is actually going to be a duplicate slide because you'll see this again when we start talking about Proposition 2. But really there's 3 phases to our capital project. There is the project planning phase, and we are now complete with that. That went from January of 2022 through October of 2022. That was all the work related to that building condition survey. It was the subcommittee work, and then it was the prioritization and ranking of all the items before we moved into the next phase, which is the approval phase, which is when we presented to the Board of Education. They reviewed everything and gave us the thumbs up to then move forward with a presentation to the community. So that's the anticipated vote coming up on March 7th, and we'll get into the logistics on that in a little bit. And then assuming that the community supports Proposition 1, we would then have to go through a very lengthy approval process and design process with our architects and with the state education department. So we're anticipating that could take upwards of about 16 months to get through. And then that will take us into the third and final phase, which is the construction and closeout phase, where we will advertise for bidding, go out to bid, have contractors submit their bids to us. Those will be read aloud. We will then vet those contracts to make sure that they are accurate, that they understand the scope of the work involved, and then we will award the contract through the Board of Education, and then they can start mobilizing, providing us all of their insurance documentation, et cetera, before we get shovels in the ground and actually have the construction begin. The next section that I'm going to talk about is the scope of work. So you're going to see a lot of the same slides as we go through this. You'll see kind of the format where it'll list the building or department in Word format with a total dollar amount, and then we'll show you some pictures of some various items just so you can see the current condition on some of the items that we're talking about. So the first building we're looking at is the high school. And at all 5 of our buildings, including, and actually 6 if we include transportation, we are looking to replace the building fire alarm system. This is an old system. It's starting to become very outdated and old. It's a safety feature that we're looking to improve and upgrade in this project. So all 5 buildings, you'll see that scope of work. Also at the high school, if you came in either through the parent drop-off loop, if you're up top, or if you came in down in the lower parking lot and came up the stairs, we're looking to replace the pavement that's coming in to that. It's starting to become uneven, becoming a tripping hazard, again, safety issue, so we're looking to replace that. And then we also have renovations to the auditorium, and I'll touch on that a little bit more when we get towards the end of this first part of the presentation to give you kind of an insight on what that looks like. So again, here's some of the pictures at the high school. So the top right and the bottom left are the pavement areas that we're going to be replacing, and then the picture of the auditorium that you're sitting in now for that. The next school we're going to look at is the Merton Williams Middle School. We are looking to add air conditioning to this building. This building here at the high school is almost fully air conditioned. There's a couple spaces that is not. Merton Williams is the where we get the most complaints from students and staff on the temperature. I've actually had to go over there several times with a little heat gun and walk around in the classrooms to make sure that the temperatures were within the range of what we're allowed to have through New York State Education Department. It does get very warm in that building. We are moving towards that as we're upgrading our HVAC systems to include air conditioning there. It won't be the full building. This will be staged for this project. We're looking at the west classrooms on the first and second floor, and then the gymnasium space there as well. We're also looking to replace some air handling unit, which serves the cafeteria. Again, that's some HVAC equipment. And then some technology classroom renovations, including having the appropriate ADA. And you'll see on the next pictures here that we have 3 on the left and 2 on the right. Those are pictures of the technology classrooms that we're looking to renovate. Right now, in order to get to those rooms, you have to actually go down a set of stairs to get into one of the rooms. And then you have to, if you have a wheelchair, need additional access, you have to go around, go into a room, cut through a classroom in order to get into that room. So we're looking to take care of that ADA issue, and we're also looking just to bring these spaces up to more modern times. These are all old, original to the building, so we're looking to make that improvement there as well. The picture in the middle is a picture of the air handling unit that we're looking to replace. Again, that's at its end of useful life for the middle school. Moving on to Northwood Elementary School, we are looking at improving the acoustics in the cafeteria, between the cafeteria and the classrooms that are around there. This was the #1 priority item that came out of the Northwood subcommittee. So what we heard is when kids were in the cafeteria, which is just outside the pod classrooms over at Northwood, teachers were having a very hard time providing instruction. So we are looking to improve the acoustics there to see if we can't make that a better learning environment for the students and staff. Northwood has probably the biggest component of our pavement needs. We've done a lot of pavement work over the years throughout the district, but at Northwood, we're basically looking at from right when you enter the building, coming in, hitting the left, going down to the bus loop, the parent drop-off loop there, and then the parking lots that serve it to the right. So, there's parking lots, there's curbing, there's sidewalks that are in pretty rough shape that need replacing. And then we have a couple air handlers left at Northwood to replace that are, again, at the end of their useful life that serves the library and the small theater over at Northwood. So if you look at the pictures, you could see on the right side and the middle picture on the left side and the middle picture on the overall screen, all of those are related to that pavement work that I was talking about. You can see that there's ponding and pooling of water. You can see the curb there is deteriorating. So those are the items that we're looking to address pavement-wise at Northwood. The picture on the very bottom is a picture of the cafeteria. The door in the far back there is where the classrooms are, and that's where they're having the hard time with the acoustics. And then the one in the upper left corner there is the air handling unit. Again, that's in the crawl space, and that's beyond its useful life. As we move on to the Quest Elementary School, We're looking to replace the emergency generator and the transfer switch and upgrade that. This is, again, something that's past its useful life. We are also looking at renovating some classrooms. This would be a complete gut and redo, so new floors, paint, new ceiling, lights, HVAC, an HVAC system. We are also looking to replace the HVAC controls at this building and upgrading them to the new digital control system. And then we're also looking to address the boiler plant and related equipment in the boiler room at Quest Elementary School. If we switch to the pictures, the middle picture on the bottom is a picture of the emergency generator. The three pictures on the top are pictures of classrooms. Again, these are old, outdated classrooms that are in desperate need of renovation work. The bottom left and the bottom right are pictures of the air handling unit and some of the equipment that is in our boiler room. Again, these boilers are over 30 years old right now. Moving on to Village Elementary School, we're looking at roof replacement. This is a small section of the roof. It's not the whole roof at Village. It's just over the learning curve and kindergarten. We already have addressed the other areas of the roof in prior capital projects. We're also looking to renovate classrooms at Village, so that same gut. So in the last capital project, we renovated 13 classrooms over at Village Elementary School. They came out beautifully. If you haven't had an opportunity to see them, they're modern, they're well lit. It's a really great learning environment for the students. We're looking to do the mirror image of that hallway on the other side, so approximately 13 other classrooms to bring them up to speed. That would basically take care of half of the classrooms over at Village Elementary School. We're also looking at replacing the natural gas water heater and storage tank, and we're looking to renovate the kitchen and HJ cafeteria. So this is where I was talking about earlier, the food service got combined with Village Elementary. They have kind of a replacement plan or thoughts on replacing and upgrading their kitchens. All of the kitchens in our district were original to the building, so this is in pretty high need that came out of that food service group. We just renovated the kitchen over at Quest Elementary last year. Now we're moving on to Village, and obviously there's plans to address additional kitchens at other buildings in future capital projects. If you look at the pictures on the other side, you can see that they have the hot water storage tank on the far left side. Underneath that is the cafeteria that would be renovated. The middle top picture is a picture of the roof that we're looking to replace over that learning curve and kindergarten wing. The picture below that and to the right of that are just two pictures of our old outdated cafeteria and kitchen. All right, so if we move on to athletics. We are looking at roof replacement at the LeBeau Field concession stand. If this proposition does go through, these will be the last two roofs in the district that are not currently under our 30-year bonded warranty. So that is something that we've worked hard in over the years for our capital projects, is to replace those roofs, make sure that they are solid, leak-proof, under warranty. So if we get these two done, then our roofs will be set. We will then be eventually going through recycling and having to update the roofs as they come off of warranty, but this will keep our roofs under warranty for the near future. And then we also have renovation work to the gymnasiums and fields district-wide. So I want to cycle back. I said I was going to cycle back to the renovation work over at the high school regarding the auditorium, and then talk a little bit about the gym and field spaces here on this slide. So the reason why we put this in is there's two separate votes that are coming up. We have vote for Proposition 1, which we're going over now. We have vote for Proposition 2, which is the Field House and Performing Arts Center, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But we could have any of four outcomes. We can have both Proposition 1 and 2 pass. We could have both Proposition 1 and 2 be defeated. We can have Proposition 1 pass and Proposition 2 be defeated. We could have Proposition 1 be defeated and Proposition 2 be passed. In the event that Proposition 2 is defeated, we know that there needs to be work done in this auditorium. It will be nowhere near the extent that we're talking about in Proposition 2, but there's definitely a need for some upgrades. It'll be more cosmetic in nature. It won't be the full replacement like you're going to see in Proposition 2. That's the same thing with our gymnasiums and our fields for athletic. If the field house does go through, then obviously we're not going to use this or the auditorium dollars budgeted for it. but we may use that to expand the scope of other items. So we may look at additional pavement work. We may look at additional classroom renovation. We may look at additional HVAC upgrades. It may simply be that we are able to have an alternate in the project that we'll be able to pick up if we're able to reallocate those funds. And it could just be that it's bid protection and bids come in high and we use those funds just to help offset the other costs so that we can move forward with the project. So I know that I've received a couple questions from the community, just why are we doing upgrades in Proposition 1 for these spaces when you're putting Proposition 2 out? So I wanted to make sure that I covered that and everybody understood what we were looking to do. If we look at the pictures associated with the district-wide athletics, the one on the far left is the roof over at the LeBeau concession field, and then the other two pictures happen to be of the small gymnasium here at the high school. So you could see kind of the condition that these spaces are in and why we were looking to renovate those spaces. Moving on to transportation. So transportation, we're kind of in a unique situation right now. We had a new mandate that came out as part of the New York State budget that said that we had to move all of our buses from diesel or gas buses to electric buses. We are still working through all the ins and outs of what that is going to look like. Our transportation department and our director, Matt Schultz, is working with the utility companies, working with our directors of buildings and grounds, working with the bus companies to see what this is going to entail. We are kind of bursting at the seams a bit at our transportation facility, so it is something that we are looking to see what we're going to be doing in the future to meet that mandate and what the best needs are for the district. So with that said, we don't have a lot of money allocated in this Proposition 1 for transportation. But the two items we have in there are both related to safety and security. Again, it's that building alarm, fire alarm system, but it's also a fire suppression system, which would be in the mechanics area who are working on our 100-plus bus fleet. So that is why we only have a small dollar amount allocated for transportation. So we did experience a little bit of technology at the start of the presentation. And so this was the number one item that came out of the Long Range Planning Committee. So out of all the items that you've seen, this was ranked number one from the committee. And this is basically replacing our complete technology infrastructure to support basically everything that we do. This is going to impact every student, every staff member, every visitor if they're getting onto our network. This is what we're looking to upgrade. Most of the items that we have technology related to our infrastructure are more than 15 years old now. So as you know, technology turns over pretty quick. So we are in need of going through and updating the switches and the wireless access points, our UPS backup systems, and all the other items that are on that list. So that was, again, the number one item that came out of that subgroup and over the overall committee, excuse me. The next slide is my kind of disclaimer for Proposition number 1. So everything that you've seen here, everything that you've seen in the insight that hopefully was mailed out and you had a chance to look at, everything that's on our website, which this presentation is also included on our website, everything that we've discussed in there could change. And what do I mean by that? So if the community approves this and we're moving forward with Proposition 1, and then we go to the next phase, which is that bidding phase, if bids come in higher than what we are looking at, we could have to reduce the scope or eliminate some of these items that we talked about. Now, we build in protections, so we work with our construction manager and our architect to identify items in here that would be considered an alternate. So we would put everything out to bid, we'd have a base bid, and we'd have alternates. So as an example, and our alternates are not defined yet, but as an example, one that our Director of Buildings and Grounds and I have talked about is the boiler plant at Quest Elementary School. We typically do capital projects every 5 years. As debt falls off our books and as we replenish our capital reserves, we typically come out and we have done projects on kind of a 5-year basis. So we talked and we said, could we get through another 5 years? He said it wouldn't be ideal. We'd probably have to have some additional maintenance costs for this, but yes, we could get through that. So that would be an example of something that we could put as an alternate. Again, so if bid prices come in high, we don't select that alternate, but we're able to do the rest of the project. So we'll be identifying those throughout this proposition before we actually get out to bid with the contractors, again, to make sure that we protect our overall budget. Okay, so now we're going to transition over to the finances related to Proposition number 1. So the red piece of the pie right there is our capital reserve. So this was something that we proposed to the community back on May 21st of 2019, and they supported creating a $4 million capital reserve that we could use in future capital projects. So we were able to fund that reserve over several years, the last couple years. That was through kind of the COVID times where we had some surpluses in our budget. We also received some additional state aid. So we were able to fully fund that $4 million capital reserve authorized back in 2019. And now we're going to use that capital reserve to help offset the local share of Proposition 1. The smaller dark gray box or pie represents about 7.5% of the overall budget. So that is our existing debt from a capital project that we had several years back, approximately 15 years back, those principal and interest payments, which are built into our budget, are now going to be paid off. So we're going to use that, which is already built into our budget, and we're going to use that to help, again, offset that local share of the project. So that's why when we say this project has no additional local tax impact, it's because we are using both that capital reserve that we set aside, plus this change in our debt and the drop-off in debt to absorb that local share so we can come out to the community with a no tax impact. The largest portion up there that you see, which represents 81.7%, is our New York State building aid. So that is something that we get aided through New York State. There's a lot of factors that go into this. We have to use a lot of assumptions to come up with this number. We do use conservative assumptions. So this, again, would be the worst case scenario for us. But right now, our projected building aid ratio is 88.8%. So that means every dollar we spend, the state is going to reimburse us almost 89 cents. Now, that is only on the items in the project that are aidable. So if there's something in the project that is not aidable, that will reduce it, and we would be on the share locally for that. So we build in what's called a bond percent, which we have at 92%. So we're assuming that 8% of the items that we're going to spend in this capital project, the state will come to us and say, we're not going to aid you on that. That's a really low number. We typically, when we go through a project, are closer to about 97, 98%. So again, this is our worst case scenario as we go through this. But I wanted to be clear that that's why we're calling this no additional tax impact for this proposition. Again, understanding that we have 3 different funding sources from it, and some of those funding sources came from surpluses in our operating budget, additional state aid received, and also debt that is coming off of our books. All right, so now we are going to switch over to proposition number 2, completely separate proposition that we're asking the community to vote on. And this is the proposition for a field house, which would be a new construction, a new build, as well as a performing arts center. The total cost of this project is $90,058,000. And we are looking at starting with the field house and then moving on to the Performing Arts Center. So we're breaking this proposition into kind of 2 phases. And it'll become clear as we go through the presentation why we're doing that. So this is the exact same slide from Proposition 1. This is related to Proposition number 2 for the field house only. So we had that same long-range planning process with the building condition survey and that project planning components. We have the same project approval components, and we have the same construction components. So we are projecting that this is going to, both Proposition 1 and the field house for Proposition 2 will be completed by December of 2027. If you move on, we're going to show you some of the renderings that were created by the architect. This is an exterior rendering of what the outside of the facility would look like. The next one is just another viewpoint of that same exterior rendering. We did some visits at various local school districts and colleges to look at kind of their construction methods for both their field house and Performing Arts Center. We learned from some mistakes. We looked at the building construction models, and we looked at what would be ideal for us here at Hilton. This is the the floor plan of the first floor of the proposed field house. And then the next slide is the second floor plan of the proposed field house. That second floor will contain a track, and I'll get into more of what each of those color-coded spaces represent. As you go to the next slide, you will see the location of where this will be on the site. So this is going to be located here at the high school. It's going to be off of the north side of the building. It's going to be connected to where we have our math wing right now. It'll be a hallway that connects both on the first and second floor to the field house. And it'll be situated with new parking that you see, as well as the full layout to handle all of the different spaces that will be in the field house. So if we go and look at some of those spaces, for the scope of work for this, we're looking at the entranceway coming in, which we will have the lobby, the concession area, security, ticketing, and a recognition area. So our athletic Hall of Fame. We'll also have what we call a feature wall, which will showcase some of our student athletes and musicians there as well. We have a multi-purpose gymnasium space. This is not just for basketball. That was one of the things that came out during the thought exchange for this proposition was, hey, this is only for basketball. That is not the case. This is going to be a multi-purpose gymnasium. There's going to be all sorts of sports and music performances that can go on in there. So we're talking like tennis, volleyball, pickleball, marching band and drumline could use this facility. We're going to have a pole vault pit in there, or an insert, so you could do practice pole vaulting in there. We'll have high jump in there as well. And really any group or athletic or instructional event that needs a large area like that would be able to utilize this facility. We're also looking at having a fitness, weight room, and cardio room. So right now, if you've ever been in the weight room in our high school, it's kind of a mismatch of rooms over the years where we kind of took down some walls and kind of pieced this together. It kind of looks like it's in the dungeon of the high school. It definitely needs an upgrade for that space. We also have a large group instruction area planned. That would be for team meetings. That would be for teams to review film for their various contests. We also have an indoor raised track. So I mentioned that we visited a couple different local schools and colleges. One in particular, Gates Chili, when we toured their facility, they said, learn from our mistake. One of the things that we did is we only had a 2 to 3 lane track, and the turns were so tight that you couldn't practice or run on them. So they said, if you're going to do anything, make sure your track is going to be suitable so that you can have athletes be able to practice on their indoors. So the track is set up to have a sprint area. It's set up so that you could actually run. You could do hurdles in there. You could do relay races, distance. And so we kind of took their advice as we went through our initial design look for this facility and that indoor raised level running and walking track. We also are looking at a turf field. So the turf field would go on the west side of the facility. This is something, again, that would allow multi-sports to utilize. So we're talking about, baseball and girls softball, boys and girls lacrosse, boys and girls soccer, looking at field hockey. So there's a lot of different sports that we would be able to pick up on there. Right now, there's nothing really like this in our area. So Gates did not have this when we visited their field house. But we thought that this was important enough to include. We're hoping that we're going to be able to have this fall within our budget. But as I mentioned, and I'll get into on the disclaimer for Proposition 2, this would be an item that we could potentially look at as an alternate to the project. We're also having offices, so our athletic director will be moving over to this new facility. Our PE teachers will be moving over to this facility. Our trainer will be moving over to that facility. So that will free up some areas within the district now, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And then we'll have some team rooms and locker rooms associated to support this house. Right now we have a team room. It's used for our male athletes for each of the seasons. We will be now having a team room for our female athletes as well. And then we are always in need of storage for athletics and really just as a district, but in particular for athletics. So we have some storage built in here, as well as mechanical rooms and restrooms associated to support this facility as well. All right, we're going to transition over to some of the renderings related to the field house. So this is a picture of the main entranceway. So this is where you would come in, you'd enter the lobby, we'd have a concession area, security, ticketing, that recognition area. What you're seeing on this picture or rendering is that feature wall that I was talking about. So this would have recognized some of our student athletes here right at Hilton. The next rendering is just another view of the concession area associated with this facility. Moving to the next one, you'll see the multi-purpose gym. This is going to be obviously for those multi-sports that I was talking about. There will be bleachers that we're hoping to have on all four sides of these, which will allow us to host sectional events here. We're also looking to have divider curtains so that multiple teams will be able to practice at the same time. And we'll talk a little bit about our thought process on practices as we get a little bit deeper into the presentation. And then I mentioned also in here, we would have, again, a couple of those items that would support our track program related to the pole vault pit and high jump area. So the only thing for track that this will not include would be anything that requires sand, so it won't include something for a long jump or a triple jump. The next picture is, again, just another view of the multi-purpose gymnasium. This is from the second floor looking down. The next slide is the fitness or cardio rendering. So this would be right when you come into that main entrance lobby, you'd go up the stairs. We'd have a fitness room, we have a cardio room. On the first floor, we would have a weight room. The next one is a picture of the running track. Again, learning from Gates, this is now a 6-wide lane track. It's capable of allowing individuals not only to walk, but also to run for practices on there. The next one is the turf field. I mentioned all of the athletic sports that would be using this, but we also have marching band and drumline that could also use this space as well. Now we're getting into some of the questions that we received during our thought exchanges. So as we kind of went through the process for Proposition 2, it made the cut on the list when we went through that long-range planning process, but obviously with the costs associated with that, it would have wiped out all of our Proposition 1 budget dollars and obviously then some. So what we did is we separated it into two propositions, and we started gathering feedback from the community. So we went to the Board of Education. They supported Proposition number 1, as I mentioned, but they also said, we'd like to get some additional information and kind of take a dipstick of the community to see kind of what their thoughts are regarding the regarding the Field House and Performing Arts Center. And the mechanism that we used to do that was through the thought exchange. So the thought exchanges came out in mid-July and ran to early August, and then came out again in late August and ran through about September 19th. And we had great participation. Between the two, we had over 700 individuals get onto the thought exchange and provide their thoughts. We had over 1,000 thoughts that were shared with us, and then we had about 30,000 ratings. So somebody could get on and see a thought and say, hey, I agree with that, click on it, and it would go through there. So when we got the results from both of those thought exchanges, it really didn't help us in our decision-making process because we saw that the community was split. We probably had almost a 50-50, maybe a 60-40 at worst, saying either in support or not in support of Proposition number 2. So that really then put it all back onto the Board of Education, who said we should let the community weigh in on this. So that's why on October 25th of 2022, not only did the board approve Proposition 1, but they also approved going out for a community vote for Proposition number 2. So that's just, again, a little bit of the background and history on how we got to where we are. So one of the questions that came out, or thoughts that were shared on the field house, is who's going to be able to use it? So we did create an FAQ for a lot of the questions that were asked there, more than I'm even going to share in this presentation. That is also out on our website. The results of those thought exchanges are also out on our website. All of the individual presentations from the Long Range Planning Committee and the subcommittees are also all out on the website. So if you wanted to get into a little bit more of the detail behind those, you certainly could do that. But first and foremost, the space is going to be used for our school activities. So our 9 to 12 PE classes will all be moved over to the new facility. All of our athletic teams will be able to be used, the new facility, and marching band and drumline, etc. We talked about even having and hosting graduation at this new facility. The problem with hosting graduation there is we would have to limit tickets, and that isn't something that we felt was going to be popular with the community, with mom and dad and siblings and grandparents and those wanting to come out and support the graduation of their son or daughter. So again, first and foremost, our school activities. We also are having community education. So that's a program that we have here at the district. It's a district-run program. We have offerings that we put out. As an example, one of those offerings might be to walk the halls of the building. So that would take place through community ed. Usually takes place at our Quest Elementary School. By having a facility like this, we're obviously going to be able to expand our offerings of community education. And now we could have the community potentially using our brand new facility with that indoor track as a place to come and walk, etc. Another big user of our facilities is the Hilton Parma Recreation. So we have partnerships, the school district has partnerships with a lot of our local municipalities, whether it's the town of Parma, the village of Hilton, the fire district. We have a lot of shared resources that we use. This was another example. Hilton Parma Rec is a heavy user of our current facilities at all 5 of our buildings. So they're using the gymnasiums and other spaces that we have now, but it's at a premium. So we're often having to tell them, I'm sorry, we can't run that program here, and they have to look for other spaces. So we're looking to expand the offerings that Hilton Parma Rec would be able to use if this proposition goes through. And then lastly is our Hilton Community Youth Sports. So again, these are some of them that I have listed here. This is not an all-inclusive list, but we have Hilton Select, Hilton Heat, the Hilton Junior Cadets. Again, they're looking after the district is using the space for district needs and then community education needs, as well as Hilton Parma Rec needs. Now they're getting in very sporadically into the buildings. We would be able to have more offerings for them with a facility like this. So another question we have is, so what would that look like? You know, when would I be able to utilize the facility? So our athletic director came up with kind of a concept to look at the different seasons that we have. So we're looking at our fall season, our winter season, our spring season, and our summer season. This is a sample calendar. This is by no means in stone. This is just to kind of give an idea of some of the thought processes that went into this. And you can see that on the left-hand side, we kind of list the major spaces that we have and that we went over and that you saw some renderings on as part of that field house. We are looking at potentially having some early morning things that might be used for the staff here at Hilton. It could even be used for community education, for those that are come in and walk or use our cardio weight room fitness center facility. We are then going to have obviously school activities taking place between the school hours, which would be through, I gotta get my glasses off for this one, but I think it's through 2:30. Let me just double check that. Yep, school activities would go from 2:30 to 6, so right when school ends, it would go to 6 p.m. And that really, the thought process behind this is, right now our practices are going to 9:30 at night. So this facility and being able to have multiple teams practicing at the same time, we're looking to have all of our student athletes done with their school practices by 6 p.m. That would allow them to get home, have dinner with their family, be able to hang out with their friends, maybe even do some homework, and go through and kind of carry on, have a job, etc. So it's going to open that up for our student athletes. And then from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., we would then open that up through community use. And what I mean by community use is it's not a free-for-all. It's not that just the community gets to come in. These are going to be scheduled events through, again, community education, Hilton Parma Rec, or by permit with the district, which is the same thing we're doing now for our existing spaces. So that's what it will look like on a kind of the Monday through Friday piece. You can see down at the very bottom, I added the 4 other school buildings. And what we're looking at those buildings is to have that run again from 6 to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday. Now, as I said, we had limited space for all the groups that wanted to use the facility. If we have a field house and we're able to get that done, this could also open up additional spaces in our other buildings. So that would be more accessible to some of these groups that I mentioned. And there may be some items that we elect to move to one of those buildings. So for instance, if Hilton Parma Rec wanted to run a floor hockey camp, and we just built a brand new field house and a brand new gym floor, we're probably not going to have them, taking hockey sticks and smashing it on the brand new floor, but we might have them go to one of our older facilities and utilize a gymnasium over there. We're also looking to have this open on Saturdays and Sundays. We are becoming more of almost a 7-day operation. We have some staffing issues, as many businesses do, so we aren't quite where we want to be yet, but if we look at Saturdays, we would hope that our practices would be done by the noon time frame for all of our school activities, and then we would open it up to those community education, Hilton Parma Rec programs from like that 9 to 3 time frame. Again, this is just a sample of what it potentially could look like on there. For Sundays, I know this already changed. We originally had that it would be from 8 until 3. Most likely that's going to be adjusted, and it'll probably be somewhere at the 10 or 11 o'clock time frame to 3 o'clock. But again, this is all subject to change, but we wanted to give you kind of an insight into what we were thinking and some of the things that we were looking at. All right, so now we are transitioning over to the timeline related to the Performing Arts Center. So you're going to see that a lot of the spaces for the Performing Arts Center are existing gym spaces here in the high school now. So we have to build the field house first, move all of those functions over to the field house. So we have a large gym, we have a small gym, we have a weight room, we have a fitness center. We have the athletic director's office, our trainer's room. All of that would have to be moved out into the new facility so that we can renovate those spaces to support the Performing Arts Center. So that first project planning phase is the same as the other 2, both for Proposition 1 and for the field house on Proposition 2. The project approval phase, that has also stayed the same as going through actually, it was extended to go through December of 2027. And then the construction phase, you can see, is now moving from and being completed in December 27 to being pushed out to a December 2029 completion date. Again, this is kind of our worst case scenario. We are still investigating and looking to see how we can improve on this schedule. So we're working with Labella, we're working with campus, we're working with BPD to see if we can't improve that schedule as we move forward. Here's the floor plan of the Performing Arts Center. So this is kind of the main entrance where you walked in. The yellow section that's on this screen is where we currently are sitting. We're not looking at changing the footprint for this, but we are looking at doing an extensive renovation in here. And then all of the other items that are color-coded on there would be to support the Performing Arts Center. And those areas include, obviously, the auditorium, but also a rehearsal and black box theater, which is a smaller, it could hold maybe up to 40 or 50 people, so that they could rehearse and practice on there. It could also be for smaller events. If we had something from an elementary school that was coming over here, or even our middle school, we could potentially use that space as well. We have some green rooms, which are basically for prepping for a performance, whether it's makeup or costume. We have a set building room. Right now we have all of our set building takes place on the stage. Actually, as we got here, we had to clean off all of the front of this auditorium because it had sawdust all over the place. So this would be a dedicated space for our set building and to store those items. We'd also have a new chorus room and a new band room. And then we have music and multi-purpose instructional space that would be included in the Performing Arts Center as well. And then we have offices related to all of our music teachers, as well as practice rooms for individual and small group lessons. And then just like athletics, with storage, music has a heavy need for storage, so we'd be building in some storage space for the Performing Arts Center. Now we're going to get into some of the renderings for each of the space. So this is, again, a rendering of what the potential auditorium would look like. Again, we wouldn't be changing the footprint of this, but it would be a complete gut and redo, everything from the stage to the seating to the sound booth and the lights. The next is a rendering of the Black Box Theater, a rehearsal space. The next is a picture, a rendering of the green room. So this is these rooms and all these supporting spaces will also have sound and video incorporated in them, so the performers will know where we are on the performance, so that they know, okay, I got to get from costume to the stage, and so they will have that opportunity to see. That was something that was requested through our music and theatrical department. There's another picture of the green room. And as we move on, you can see the scene shop rendering. As I said, all scenes right now are currently built on the stage, and they're stored just off the stage. This would allow us to have a set building room dedicated for support to the Performing Arts Center, as well as storage. So it would be you build the items, you store the items, you move the items in to the back of the stage for their performances. The next is a rendering of our chorus room. Again, these are renderings, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but it may not look exactly like this. These are just kind of the conceptual drawings that we are showing you tonight. The last rendering that I'm going to show you is the concession rendering. So this is going to be where the current main office and attendance offices are. So when you came into the building, if you came in on the parent drop-off loop, it's right in the upper lot. It's right to the right. If you came up the stairs into the building, it's right there on the left. If you notice, you had to walk through a set of doors, and our security department is right there. So our main office and attendance area is not within the secure lock of our building. It's not to say that it's not secure. They can shut the door. It's not very welcoming or affirming, but they can be secure. But we are looking to fix that and have those two functions, the main office space as well as the attendance office, moved over to where the current athletic director and fitness center is. So again, another reason why we need to have that field house done first before we get into the Performing Arts Center side of things. So we have a couple of the same questions that came out of that thought exchange regarding to what groups can use the Performing Arts Center. So we have a lot of school activities that will be able to be moved to here and that are currently here for us. So we have our school day instruction, we have an IB theater class, we have a chorus classes, our band classes, and any other class that could utilize in a space like this instructionally. We have our extracurricular clubs that could use this space. We have musicals and plays and concerts, whether it's band concert or chorus concert or jazz concert. We have marching band and drum line that often use the space now, that would continue to use that. And then some of our elementary and middle school programs could use that. So as an example, middle school hosts their National Junior Honor Society here. They would obviously be able to use that new space as well. So this is a kind of the same disclaimer I used for proposition number 1. The scope of work could change from what you see here based on how bids come in. We could have to reduce that in scope, in size. We could have an alternate that may or may not end up in the project, again, determining on how those bids come in. And all of those renderings you saw are just that, they're renderings. So it's not necessarily what the final product is going to look like. We have to go through a whole host of processes. So if the community comes out on March 7th and supports this and we're going to move forward with it, we have a lot of work to do from the design side, working with our various stakeholder groups, whether it be our music teachers, our athletic programs, to really now dial down from a conceptual rendering all the way down to what color paint are we going to be putting on the walls. So there'd be a lot of meetings before the final product is determined. All right, now we're going to get into the finance on proposition number 2. So You could see with the green box there that we have about 35.3% of this project being aided by New York State. So I mentioned earlier that our building aid ratio was 88.8%. However, when you have new construction, there's different rules. So when we have a new build, they don't aid that. So this aid is related to the interior renovations. We could have built the field house inside the footprint of this building, and they would have given us 90% aid on that. It wouldn't have made much sense, but we tried with the state to reason with them and see if they would allow us to have a new build, which would be ideal, and we just couldn't get there to make that change for us. So that represents a much smaller portion. On Proposition 1 you saw was like 81.7%. Here it's 35.3%. There is no capital reserve allocated for this project. We're using that capital reserve for Proposition number 1, which means that the lion's share of this would be new debt service. Or to put another way, this would be the amount that would be funded by the taxpayers. New buildings are funded over a 30-year period. And that matches the permanent financing schedule that we use in our payments related to principal and interest payments. So a capital project has principal and interest payments just like a home mortgage would have principal and interest payments. The overall impact of this proposition with both our temporary financing and then transitioning to permanent financing would have an impact that would last 33 years overall from when we start this process. The next slide, which is really in conjunction with this slide here, is the local share tax impact. So the bottom line is, what is this going to do to my taxes here at Hilton? So there's a lot of assumptions that we use and factors that go into this. I'm not going to get into all of those details, but again, I want to point out this is what we're showing you is the average cost. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means, but it's the average cost over that 33-year financing for this project. You can see down the left side of the screen that we have home values starting at $100,000 and going up by $50,000 increments up to $300,000. Again, that is just to show where you fall individually on that. We know that this doesn't cover every single scenario that's out there, but those are the home values. What we do know in talking with the town assessors is right now the 4 towns that comprise our district make up an average home value of approximately $200,000. 3 out of the 4 are under $200,000, and 1 of the towns is slightly over $200,000. So that's why we have that one boxed out, just so you can kind of get a sense of what that looks like. And 76% of the homes in the district fall at that $200,000 level or less. So we hope that it's a pretty good representation of what the estimated tax burden will be to the community. Again, this is based on all those assumptions. It's our worst case scenario that we are projecting. So you can see that there's 3 boxes there. There is an enhanced star box for those that qualify for enhanced star. There's a basic star box for those that qualify for the basic star. And then there's a no star box there as well. So you can see both the annual and monthly cost associated with this project. So for enhanced star, you're talking $177 a year or $15 a month. Again, all these numbers are also rounded. I didn't go out to the decimals. Basic star is $233 annually or $19 a month on a home valued at $200,000 with the basic star. And if you have no star and your home's valued at $200,000, it'd be $274 a year or $23 per month. Again, that is the average cost. So the way that this is structured financially is we're going to start out with a lower amount, and then we're going to ramp up and kind of hit the peak, which may be greater than this dollar amount that you're seeing on here in the 26-27 year, and then you're going to see it start declining over the remaining term of this till it gets to the end of that 33-year period on there. So it's going to go up a little bit, and then it's going to go down a little bit, but this is showing you the average. All right, so what is on the ballot for March 7th? What we're asking the community to vote on is either supporting or not supporting Proposition 1. And then even though we have authorization to create the capital reserve, we also need authorization from the community to use the capital reserve. So because Proposition 1 is utilizing that $4 million, there's two components that will be in the language on the ballot for Proposition 1 on March 7th. For Proposition 2, the Fieldhouse and Performing Arts Center, that will be strictly for the approval of the project and the relating borrowing associated with that. We did change the voting location. This came from feedback that we received from the community in really two forms. It was from our exit survey that took place at the conclusion of the regular May vote for our general fund budget and board election. So we had an exit survey, and we had many comments from the community that said, why are you holding a public vote in your school district during an active school day? Either change the location or don't have school that day. So we also received a community petition signed by a couple hundred individuals stating the same thing. And so this is something that we've been talking about for several years with the Board of Education and the administration. And as I mentioned, we have a lot of partnerships with various municipalities. We reached out to the town of Parma and said, would you be willing to host our votes in the future? And they were amenable to that, and that is why we elected to move the voting location, which traditionally was held at the high school and at Northwood Elementary School, over to the Parma Town Hall. And it was really a safety and security decision with the number of school shootings and just the world we live in today. Safety was a top priority, and that's why we elected to move that over to the Parma Town Hall. The polls will be open on March 7th from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. We also have absentee ballots. We've had hundreds that have been requested, and we've had well over 50 that have already been received, and I think that number is even greater than that. So at this time, what we're going to do is we're going to take a break for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then we're going to have some administrators walking around with those comment cards. They'll also have pens, so if you need a pen, you can fill this out, and then we will recollect them from you. So just raise your hand if you want a card, you have a question, we'll get you the cards. Fill out your questions, come back, we'll raise your hand again, we'll come and collect your cards, and then we're going to have one of our administrators, Tracy Zabato, moderate for us, and we'll answer as many of the questions as we can. And at the end, if there's still time, we'll then allow everybody to come up if you have an individual questions. So we're just getting the materials set up now, and be patient as we go through this process, and we'll be back in about 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay, we are going to get started with our questions. Alrighty, the first question is district specific, so for one of the superintendents. What are the student participation levels for using Fieldhouse or performing arts that would justify $90 million in funding? Oh, yep. What are the participation levels for Fieldhouse and performing arts that would justify that $90 million funding?
Well, I can jump in. Testing, 1, 2. There we go. I could jump in from the Fieldhouse standpoint, and then we can refer to the Performing Arts Center. But if you look at our student population from obviously 9th through 12th grade, we have our entire student population that we utilize it during the school day. From our athletic program, we have upwards, depending on the season, we could have anywhere from 500 to 800 student athletes each and every season. Along with that Fieldhouse aspect, the sharing of facilities for our marching band, for our drum line, and to be able to offer the opportunities within that. So it's for our student population primarily to have conducive facilities, but also that community resource so that beyond that school day to incorporate it for the entire community. Ms. Polini, do you want to?
Sure. When we think about the Performing Arts Center, this auditorium is one of the most widely utilized spaces that we have district-wide. We utilize this space for our Northwood Theater Club, so that's not one of our elementary schools. We have a Merton Williams musical. There's also a Quest musical. We have over 130 band members at Quest alone. That's our smallest elementary school. We have similarly sized bands at Village and at Northwood as well, and also our choral music program. All of those concerts come to use this facility and use this space. And with the expanded square footage that this project would afford us, we would be able to run our concert season a little bit more smoothly and share the spaces more readily. So for instance, because we don't have a dedicated space to build our sets for our musical, and it takes a long time to build the elaborate sets that they have for our high school musical or middle school musical, our students that come over from Northwood don't have all the space on the stage that they would like to have or would need to have necessarily, because some of our set building spaces have to be over into the sides. So it would allow for a more collaborative use of the space for all of those hundreds of students that participate in our performing arts programs and courses that we offer here in the school.
Another thought that went into the concept of building new facilities were districts that we compete against, Churchville, Chili, Gates, other districts across Monroe County are building these facilities. And someone said, well, several of the questions I fielded over the last couple of weeks is, how does that really recruit families to come to this district? And I think it really comes down to the opportunity to purchase real estate. So when individuals are, when you see the postings for homes for sale in the district, it's usually Hilton School District, among some other school districts in Monroe County that are ranked at the highest end for the quality of education. So some of the thought process includes providing those types of facilities so that when families are making decisions, they see a great education program, they see great facilities, more people move in, the property value goes up. So that was one of the concepts as well that was discussed at great depth with why we would want to make some of these changes.
Okay, Adam, this next question is for you. We have similar questions based on student enrollment. One person citing that they believe there is declining enrollment that does not justify this expenditure. Someone else asking how the last 3 years with declining enrollment would justify this, and someone else asking if you've looked out over the next 25 to 30 years for student body growth and or decline and how this is justified.
So we do look at enrollment trends. It was interesting. I had a conversation with a gentleman before the evening started, and we were talking about the cohort survival method that he was familiar with, and we do utilize that. We have about 10 different enrollment projections that we utilize every year for our budget development process. And Hilton has been one of those districts that has been remaining stable. A lot of districts throughout the county have had declining enrollment. They've had closures to buildings. We haven't. We really do believe that Hilton is a destination district. We believe that the school district is one of the reasons for that. So our enrollment has been remaining flat. Within 100 or so students, it's been like that for several years. And we do look out approximately 10 years in advance. Obviously, the further out you get on those enrollment projections, the more variables are in play. But we are updating those every single year as we go through it. Earlier today, we were chatting with some individuals, and we talked about enrollment across the county. And really, there's only a couple school districts. We talked about Hilton, we talked about Victor, is those districts that are continually staying flat or growing. So we do believe that that base of student population is there. We also believe that if we have a top-notch facility to go along with the top-notch education, that more families will want to move into the district. Again, we were chatting with a couple today who recently purchased a home in Hilton. They do not have kids at the moment, but they said the reason why they chose Hilton was because of the school district. So it kind of reaffirmed some of our thought processes.
Okay, the next questions fall around some areas that are probably for you, Adam, as well as Mark Edwards from Buildings and Grounds. Talking about ongoing cost of maintenance for new facilities, looking at items like additional staff that may be needed, wondering what it will specifically cost. I'll list out some of these and I can list them again, but for things like security, cleaning, maintenance, insurance, electric, water, looking at increased costs that would be different than what we are paying now, and a question about if we're replacing sidewalks and other items, painting, lighting, why isn't that already built into typical budgeting? So looking at ongoing and improvements, how much will it increase? Looking at all of the efficiencies, and then why isn't this already built in?
All right, so I'll start with that, and then I will let Mark chime in from the maintenance side of things. But we've had conversations about what additional staffing is needed, what additional utilities are needed. We started taking preliminary looks at these, but these are not fully developed at this point in time. And one of the thought processes was we want to see what the community says before we start determining what the additional costs are. We have a good sense, but we haven't dived down into the details of that to be able to provide specifics. As far as what falls under kind of our operating budget versus what falls under a capital construction budget, as we go through, we have maintenance issues or maintenance items that are in our general fund budget, which the community votes on every year in May. And then those items that are above or beyond what we could put through a general operating budget, including those items that we would receive aid from New York State on through a capital program, that's how we determine what items we put through to a capital project. It's not good financial sense to take something that would fall under and qualify for building aid and then turn around and do it out of our operating budget and not have any aid related to that. And I'll let Mark kind of comment on some of the maintenance and utility costs.
Yeah, Adam did a great job answering most of the question that was asked. From the utility standpoint, we've done some preliminary projections just looking at our cost per square foot for each of the utility components that we deal with at all of our school buildings as an average, and we've been factoring that against the different anticipated sizes of this of the field house. So we started off at a particular number. That number's changed a few different times. It's gone up, it's gone down. So we haven't really locked that in, but just taking our average cost per square foot to provide electric, water, gas for the services is how we've factored or created at least a preliminary budget.
Just one other thing that I wanted to add on to the utility costs is as a district, we have several agreements with solar farms in the area. There's one on Manitou Road. There's a couple that we have partnered with in Ogden. So we get a lot of our electrical use from those solar farms at a discounted price than what we would pay through the traditional means and methods. So that is something that we're continuing to look at. We would love to build a solar field on our district property. We had looked over at Northwood, again, looking to keep costs down. Those are some of the strategies that we use. So
Testing? Okay. Our next question has to do with reserve budget. And Melissa, I'm thinking maybe if you can start and then toss it back to Adam if needed. Can you talk about reserve budget and how that gets replenished and if there are plans in place to make sure that is replenished?
Adam, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So as I mentioned in the presentation, back on May 21st of 2019, the community put forth a $4 million, or approved a $4 million capital reserve. That reserve has been funded over the last couple years, so it is maxed out. That reserve is good for a 10-year period. That's by state law. We have to use the funds within that time frame, and we have to get permission from the community in order to use those funds. Once we use those funds and that balance goes to zero or anything less than that $4 million, we cannot just replenish that. We would have to go back out to the community asking for another capital reserve in a new amount with a new 10-year period in order for us to establish a new capital reserve. And that's how every district in New York State has to operate.
Great. Okay. Our next question has to do with auditorium. We have several that are going to talk about the scope of the project, so we'll be having a few just going further in depth. The first one is, if Proposition 2 were defeated, would you still put the auditorium update out for a vote since the state pays about 90% of it?
Yeah, so again, as I said in the presentation, and just as a question indicated, if we're doing construction within the confines of the building, we do get a much higher building aid ratio on that. So if the Proposition 2 is defeated, or if any of the propositions are defeated, we have a couple choices. We could not do anything, and meaning that, hey, we heard the community loud and clear, we're not moving forward with this, and therefore there will be no additional vote. We could put out the same proposition as it stands and try again. Typically school districts do that when you have a vote that is really close. You would then put it back out and see if the community would support it a second time. We could also modify the scope, which I think is what this question was getting at. So could we eliminate the field house and just do renovations to the auditorium? We certainly could. We could elect to do some renovation. It would not be what you saw presented tonight for the Performing Arts Center, because we couldn't take the space that was allocated to our current gymnasium, our current main office and attendance office, and some of those other spaces, and start renovating it with nowhere else to put them. So we could potentially do something in the space that we are all in tonight, but it wouldn't be anything beyond that.
Okay, we're going to continue on talking about auditorium. Maybe Eric and Gary want to chime in on this one from LaBella and Campus. Why not update the auditorium first, or at the same time as the field house, since the auditorium is keeping its same footprint? It would allow music to use space during construction, especially because they don't want to wait until 2029 for that update. Start there. Why the order that it is?
Yeah, I think part of that answer would be the phasing of the construction. We need that space over the gym to get built as a field house before we can fully renovate the area over here for the performing arts, including the Black Box Theater space.
Okay.
And I will add to that. So we are continuing looking at different models and timing on when we're going to do the construction. So I mentioned in the presentation that right now I'm giving the worst case scenario, which would push that Performing Arts Center out to the completion of 2029. But if we have a mechanism or a way to improve that, we certainly are looking at that. We're having discussions. We meet with the capital project team right now on a bi-weekly basis. And we are looking at various ways that we can improve that schedule. So I didn't want to come here tonight and overpromise and underdeliver. So we kind of gave the worst case scenario as to what we think it's going to be. And then if we can improve on that, I think then everybody would be happy about that.
Okay, Adam. Do you have the answer? Does the current auditorium or the proposed Performing Arts Center hold the entire high school population? And was there a discussion about making the proposed Performing Arts Center larger?
So I'm going to kind of look at our high school principal because I think the answer to that is no, it does not hold our entire population of high school. I didn't think so. I think it's about, and somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, the capacity is about 800 and something in this auditorium, and I believe we're around 1,400 in the building, and that's students, that's not including staff. So we did talk about expanding the size of that. It got very costly to move the footprint of this, which is why we elected to keep it at the same size.
Also, the thought process was if the community supported the field house, that would be the area where we could bring the entire high school and staff together.
Okay. Dr. Kosorek, have you had any type of conversations about security that would be available in the field house or performing arts center? And would that be 7 days a week? What would the hours be?
Yes, we would continue with our security plan where we have moved during my tenure in hiring retired law enforcement from Monroe County, Greece, and New York State troopers. We would continue with that plan, and we would have those individuals provide security during the time that the community used the facility, if that were the case, but also during the school day, as is with our current plan.
Thank you. Kristen, will Proposition 2 increase student participation or increase educational programs?
It absolutely will afford the opportunity for more individuals in the community to be, in the school district, to be using this space. Like I spoke about before, when we look at our musical programs, you may be very well aware of concert seasons that we have in the November, December months, and then again in our spring months as well. And that's when many of our instrumental and choral groups come together, and it's from all the different buildings. Many of our buildings have different groups within them, so they have an advanced band, or they might have a jazz band. And so we're talking about upwards of 25 different performing groups in just the choral and the instrumental music programs. And this will allow us to have more performance space and allow us to run things simultaneously. So for instance, our theater club can be working, our drama in the fall or our musical production in the spring can be working to use space like the Black Box Theater while we have an elementary performing group here. And so what it will allow is for more of that to happen in a collaborative fashion, which I do believe will allow students to participate in more of those programs. So for instance, where sometimes they may have conflicts between those different groups, they might be able to partake in all of them. And so I see us potentially expanding that. Additionally, there's something to be said about new spaces with updated sound and lights and equipment, and I think it will really bring a draw to the attention for the performing arts programs that we have and entice other students to try some of those areas they may not have experienced before. We have a very strong music program, very dedicated educators who are consistently looking to grow that program, and I can only see a new space and additional square footage for us to perform and to practice and to enjoy that being a draw for students into the program.
Thank you. This next question is for Mark Edwards, possibly Eric, and then probably followed up by Adam. Are you planning to ask for more money to accommodate the parking needs? What are the plans for parking for these facilities? And a shuttle would not be a good solution if the parking needs are not met to begin with.
I think the photos that Adam showed a short while ago did show some expanded parking that supports the new field house. The idea would be that we would be able to have staff use that area during the active school day, which would allow more student parking, which is something that we're currently short of on the high school site. It would, on some of our busier days, when we have large events happening on our grass fields and our turf fields, I don't think that spillover would be eliminated. I believe we would still have that happen on some of those larger team type events.
And also, if I can jump in, if those of you that were fortunate enough to see the outstanding event when we had our evening of jazz here in the auditorium and we had our Division I wrestling match, what we learned, and we talked about parking. We had close to 1,400 people in our gymnasium. They probably had 600 to 700 spectators and artists here in the and we realized, and we had a clear plan for parking. We have more parking on our facility than we believe if we utilize it efficiently. And what I really looked at that night as an opportunity for us to really bring the Hilton community together and celebrate being cadets. And we proved that with parking and a clear plan, that those events can happen simultaneously. As I think you're all well aware, in the fall, we might have events on LeBeau Field with 3,500 spectators. And we're able to house that from a parking standpoint. But we learned from the event we did a couple weeks ago that we can be more efficient and utilize our space better. But there is much more parking. And the question regarding the shuttle, we did have shuttle buses prepared and we did use them. We realized that we really don't need them, because if we do it efficiently and effectively, we have enough parking here for multiple large-scale events to be run.
Okay. This next question is for Eric or someone from Labella. What is the exact size of the indoor turf field? Is it 60 yards by 120 yards?
The field is not competition size. It is maxed out to its limits of the proposed building width. So it is not an event-worthy area, and it would not have area for seating. So it would be for practice use only.
Thank you. Mike, sorry.
Sorry, I'm just going to add too, on the presentation, it's really, really hard to see. So even with my readers on and my bad eyes, I can't see it, but the square footage is listed for that turf field on there. So if you go out to the website and you pull that up and zoom in on it, I'm sure you'll get the exact number for that field. I just can't read it on the printed copy that I have.
It's approximately 3/4 of a football field in size.
Thank you. Mike, the outdoor turf was made during past projects. The argument was it was multi-season use. Why would we build an indoor turf facility? Doesn't this negate the previous investment in turf?
Well, you know, there's two pieces to it. Throughout the process that Mr. Geist laid out early, we did talk about multi-purpose facility for potentially baseball, softball, multi-use. And then as we sort of, honed in, we don't, we're inside. It's Western New York. So we're practicing and we're having activities indoors more often than not. So the opportunity to have this multi-use space, and I think, Mr. Geist, when we did our tour and we saw Nazareth, I think that's probably when our light bulb went off and we saw that turf field behind. So the thought process was, we have LeBeau Field, and those that were around when we began the planning for that, we actually talked about turfing a different space for better usability, but we determined that LeBeau Field was our marquee space, so we put the turf there. It's still limited use. You'll come out there in 3 weeks, and there's programs there until 9:30 at night. The thought process of indoor turf will give all of our organizations an opportunity to practice really those October to March months and have the opportunities to train both in-school activities and out-of-school community activities.
Thank you. Someone from Labella in the design process, as it stands right now, are we at the detail level to know, will the field house be heated and air conditioned?
Yes, the plan is for the field house to be heated and air conditioned.
Thank you. Probably Labella again. How do the sizes of the band and chorus rooms compare to the existing spaces? Do you have that comparison?
I believe they're a little bit larger, probably 120% bigger. So it's a little bit larger than it is currently.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Kocourek and Mr. Geist. This is about locker rooms and bathrooms and safety, making sure that there's privacy for students in the new facilities with the way that they are being built. And then that's for Prop 2. And in Proposition 1, are single-use bathrooms being added or modified as part of Proposition 1?
So the quick answer is yes. So as we're building new bathroom facilities, there are a lot of questions about what's happening in society and different laws that are being put in place by New York State and what school districts have to abide by. And we do have to make sure that we're not violating individuals' civil rights via New York State law. So one of the things that we've learned, not only about that, but about the number of students who choose to come in and vape, the number of students who choose to come in and use their cell phone to record others, the number of students who choose to eat lunch in the bathroom, we are finding that the best thing for us to move forward to provide a safe area for individuals to use the facility rather than waiting to go home is to move forward in renovating the bathrooms into single-use rooms. So we are in the process of looking at two of the main restrooms here in the high school, because the high school, unfortunately, whether we want to like this or not, seems to draw the biggest concern. Our elementary students and middle school students overall seem to continue to be using the restroom in an appropriate fashion. A majority of our high school students do use it in an appropriate fashion, but unfortunately, there are concerns that come forward from the community and sometimes our students. So the answer to that question is yes. We're moving forward in redesigning bathrooms in a process, whether the projects that are proposed move forward or not. If the projects that are proposed do move forward, those will be considerations when we build those restrooms. But also, we will have to, there is expectations as far as fixture heads, and there are requirements through the state for how many fixture heads we need to have in restrooms. So currently, I'll even answer some questions about our current facility. Some community members may be unaware that since the pandemic, we do not require students to change for physical education. Also, in a recent renovation, we were able to install in the locker room here at the high school, there are seven different private stalls if a student chooses to want to change away from other students. So with a majority of students not changing for physical education, and then the students who do choose to change for physical education have an opportunity for that privacy. And we also work with building administration, so if students come forward and have concerns for a variety of reasons that we've alluded to, making sure that everybody can feel comfortable in what they're doing. So the answer is yes. We're looking at some renovations to improve our bathroom facilities and current facilities, and then in future planning, making sure that if there are new builds, that they are having those single-use bathrooms so people can feel safe and comfortable when they use the facility.
Thank you. Our next questions have to do with third-party use and financing. So how would having third-party groups come in help to pay for these new facilities that they want to use? Is there anything earmarked that asks them to help reduce this debt?
Yeah, I'll start from a sectional standpoint. I mean, if we look at the facilities from a field house and from the amenities, we already host some large-scale events on the Bow Field. So the opportunity to host some large-scale events and bring in revenue and offset costs and also give back to our community, so our booster groups and our sport programs and our sports boosters have the ability to come back. And I think that's a piece of it. So, you know, to be a marquee space that when you have a Section 5 final contest, it's here in Hilton Central School District, it's in a field house, it's on the Bow Field, and people drive onto our campus and we talk about Destination District. You know, you feel good about our school, our community being a cadet. So from that standpoint, it really raises, you know, our marquee, if you will, but there will be opportunities to bring funds into our school district through those third-party groups. And there might be other things that we're able to do even beyond as we get to this point, beyond, say, education-based athletics, Section 5, youth organizations. I mean, currently, you know, you look at our Hilton Select basketball, they travel every weekend. So are we hosting, you know, select weekend games, Saturdays and Sundays, and the opportunity to bring in, again, people into our community, but the potential for revenue.
Okay. We have estimates on taxes for different priced homes. Questions about the impact from commercial side. So commercial properties or multi-use homes such as apartment complexes or plazas with many businesses in them, and then with community members who pay rent. What will happen there? Is their rent being increased? Do commercial properties pay a different amount? How is that factored in the same or differently with cost of homes?
Yeah, I'll just, as far as private landlords and tenants, that certainly is a decision of the property owner, whether they're going to pass on the burden of that in the rent. As far as individuals who are renting private dwellings within the district, apartments. Adam will talk more from a commercial standpoint.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter if it's a residential home or a business. There is one tax rate for the district per the town in the district, and it's the same. The only difference it could be is if we have entered into an agreement, which would have been through Monroe County Industrial Development Agency, which is known as a pilot or payment in lieu of taxes, where a business would come in. Typically, they have to guarantee so many jobs in the community. They would then receive a lower tax rate than what we would have to the rest of the public and the rest of the businesses that don't qualify for that. It's typically for a 15-year period, and then that runs out, and they would go on to the tax rolls just like everybody else.
Okay, we have a series of questions that have to do probably with long-range planning decisions. Were there thoughts to making big security upgrades in Proposition 1?
So we do have several security upgrades in Proposition 1, as I mentioned, with the building alarm system being replaced in all of the buildings, including transportation. We have the fire suppression system in transportation. We have some pavement work leading into the buildings, which can be considered a trip hazard. So we consider those safety upgrades as well. Too close there, sorry. And then in the past capital projects, we have done a lot on the topic of safety and security. We now have secure vestibules in each of our 5 buildings. We have security behind a secure glass. We have window film on all of our first floor windows. We have a product called Defense Light on all of our entranceways. We are in phase 3 of the project where we're going to have additional corridor doors in the event of the panic button being deployed, that those doors would shut and be locked. We're having a new building security system put in. So we've just purchased a new security vehicle for our security staff to patrol our grounds and go between our buildings. So there have been a lot of security upgrades that we've done over the years. I'm sure I'm missing many more, but we have definitely had a focus on safety and security in both past capital projects and the current ones that are being proposed.
Another question about long-range planning and the decision to go out with 2 propositions. Why didn't the Long-Range Planning Committee or the Board of Education propose 3 propositions, one being as it is, a second with the field house, and a third with performing arts, basically separating the 2 larger projects?
It was tough enough to put 2 propositions together, let alone 3, but really the determining factor when we were moving through the long-range planning process was the space that we needed to create a performing arts center in the high school needed to be taking over the gymnasium spaces and some other spaces. So we couldn't have, for instance, the field house get voted down and then a performing arts center pass because we then have the space that needs 2 uses, which we would not be able to do. So we did early on have the idea of having one new facility that would have been a complete new build for one half being the field house and one half being the performing arts center. But again, that led us to 8 issues, which is why we came back in and said we'll have one proposition to help offset the overall cost. But we did not consider having 3 different propositions.
Thank you. Melissa, this is a question about the expenditures within these propositions and other bond issues that would come about within the next 10 years. Just asking the questions, how does an expenditure like this proposition affect future requests and needs with borrowing and bonds?
So for each district has their own debt limit, and the financing proposed here is within the available debt limit for the district. Oh, sorry.
I can answer because I'm familiar enough with it. If you get your mic working, you can jump in, Melissa. So every school district in New York State has a debt limit that's calculated based on the size of the district and the occupancy of the building. So we can't just go out and, for instance, create new classrooms if there's not a need for the new classrooms. It has to run through a formula through the New York State Education Department, which is why we use our finance consultants to go through that calculation to ensure that, yes, this is something that will fall within our particular, meaning the Hilton Central School District's overall debt limit.
Okay, this is for you, Adam, maybe a little bit for Mark Edwards. The 2015 Building Condition Survey indicated that transportation needed over $7 million in renovations, yet only $159,000 is being allocated. The question is why, and just letting you know, this leads into further questions about buses, state mandates, electric buses, long-term upgrades of transportation and for buses that are mandated. How can we do this knowing all of that is on the horizon?
So we did do some significant renovation work over at the transportation facility with that 2015 building condition survey. So, we have a new fuel system in there. We have new pavement and parking lot. We did some work on the interior of the building. There was an addition for storage related to, storing tires for the buses. So those were all upgrades that were part of that $7 million that were done in the last capital project. This capital project, as I mentioned, we did not allocate a lot of funds for this. It was just under $160,000 for those two safety and security items. We do know, and we've been working to learn as the state came out with the new state mandate for electric buses, that we have to learn and understand what that's going to entail as far as the infrastructure related to utilities, whether or not the utility company is even going to be able to support it. Early on in the project, when we reached out to the utility company, they said, if you tried to hook up 100 buses on our grid, the lights would be flickering in the village of Hilton. So we have to go through a lot of planning. We are working closely with the state. My organization, which is the Assistant Superintendent of School Business Officials, continues to lobby on behalf of the state. We don't disagree that we need to do something for cleaner fuel vehicles. Whether or not mandating them for school districts at a cost per bus of about 3 times what it costs us now, we're still waiting to see what that looks like. But we have transitioned our fleet from diesel buses to gas buses. We're continuing to go down that path until we have to start purchasing the new electric buses, in which time we will have the new infrastructure in place, and hopefully RG&E will, and the utility companies will have that figured out so that we can proceed as planned. Our transportation director does have a replacement cycle for our current buses. It does entail the new mandate from the state, but again, we are hoping that will be delayed or changed or modified in some fashion. And just one more point on the electric buses. One of our neighboring districts did purchase an electric bus just to test it. They have definitely learned a lot from it. They have been sharing that with other districts around the county. It's not all what it's portrayed to be. There's definitely some positives associated with it, but there's also a lot of hurdles that they have to overcome and a lot of learning. So they're kind of taking the lead on that in the county. We're going to learn from them and then hopefully be able to implement what we need to here at Hilton.
Okay. I will give your thinking brains a quick pause for a compliment. This is not a question. We have a parent who would like to thank you for all your work with this. They are a parent who has students in both music and sport opportunities, and said that they've seen what other schools do with their facilities. They're grateful for what happens in Hilton and would love to see our community have more pride in the facilities in Hilton. Now time for more questions. why was the finance part on Proposition 2 $90 million and not $58 million? Why wouldn't we be financing, we wouldn't be financing 90 million, would we?
So yes, the $90 million is the budget. We cannot spend any more than what is authorized if the community decides to support that proposition. We would have to borrow the funds for the $90 million. The way that the New York State Building Aid works is you spend the money and then you submit your reports to the state once the project is complete, and then they begin aiding you after that. That's a really simplified version of what takes place. There's a lot of more steps that are involved in that, but hopefully that answers the question. We have to borrow the full amount, pay all the contractors and all of those expenses related to building the project. Once it's done, then we submit for reimbursement to the state. And they reimburse us on a new build over a 30-year period. If it was strictly a renovation, like in Proposition 1, that would be aided over a 15-year period.
Thank you. Mark Edwards and Gary from Campus Construction, if you guys can tackle this one. What happens if these propositions are approved, but due to supply chain issues, we can't meet deadlines for the district to accomplish these projects and file all of the required paperwork with the state? Has that happened, and what do we do under supply chain issues?
So that is a real challenge that we live in today, and what we've tried to do is forecast based on what we know today for how this project would be accomplished. So the durations that you're seeing tonight, we've done our very best to address those challenges with supply chain and labor, certainly. Is why you're looking at a calendar time of 23 through 29.
Okay. This next one has to do with current taxes that homeowners pay. What is the percentage or how much of current tax money is used to pay past capital debt costs?
It represents about almost 9% of our budget. At last evening's Board of Education meeting, actually it was the meeting before that on the 14th of February, I presented the debt service budget for the district to the Board of Education. That presentation is out on the website. That lists all of our principal and interest payments for all of our past capital projects that we currently still have on the books. It also lists all of the borrowings related to our buses, which is also something that we bond through that program. So if you're interested, go out to the website. You can get specifics on each of those borrowings. It'll tell you everything from the term, the interest rate that we have, the actual principal and interest payments for the year, and the balance remaining on those debt borrowings.
Okay, this next one talks about fundraising. Are there teams or student groups that are creating fundraisers to offset the costs of the field house and or arts center? Kristen, maybe you'd know if those have been approved, and then if yes or no, Adam, if you can chime in.
You want to start?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. There are no fundraisers that are looking to directly impact the cost of these venues. So
Somebody knows of some good fundraising that could support this, we would definitely be interested in connecting with them for sure.
All righty. Adam, I think you're probably the one who can answer this. Can you please rate, maybe Melissa can help, the type of school buses by cost? So a diesel bus compared to a gas bus compared to a battery/electric bus, and they would like to know the cost of the bus, the longevity, and then the cost for like maintenance with fuel specifically, or I guess charging.
I am not going to have all of the answers to those questions. I will give general terms. This would definitely be something that our Director of Transportation would have, but a diesel bus is going to run you around $120,000. A gas bus is going to run you around $130,000. And an electric bus at the moment is going to run you around $450,000. We have approximately an 8 to 10 year replacement cycle depending on the type of bus. So if we have a small bus that travels, all throughout the county and has higher mileage, we may have to trade in that bus sooner than a bus that's here in the village of Hilton picking up kids. That bus may last 10 years. We get about, it's less than $1 a gallon for fuel on these buses. For the electric buses, we're still learning a lot about them. I don't have the longevity on what those are. We did hear that the batteries would be something that we would have to replace before we had to buy a new bus, and those batteries are upwards of $80,000 at the moment. Once those do, the technology improves and comes down, hopefully we'll see the cost of those drop as well. We have lots of questions, as I mentioned earlier, that we have out to the state, like what do we do with these? Now we're going with this clean concept, but now we're turning around and dumping, all of these batteries into a landfill somewhere. So there's definitely been a lot of conversation around the topic of electric buses. We also have to have training for all of our mechanics to be able to work on these buses. They need special equipment, whether it's tools or PPE, protective personal equipment, in order to work on them as well. So these are some of the things that we are learning because, as I said, a neighboring district did purchase one bus. Charging stations are another big issue. Any sort of trip that's going to be length, so somebody going to a state match somewhere or a field trip that's out of the district, we definitely have issues with how are we going to charge those and get back. So there is just a whole host of questions that we are waiting on answers from the state. They're supposed to be releasing a report that is going to give us some additional guidance that is not out yet. But the clock is ticking on the mandate for when we have to go forward with this. So it is definitely frustrating trying to manage this when we don't have all of the answers at this time. Yeah, and I can I'll explain a little bit on Transaid, and Melissa, feel free to jump in. So we get transportation aid. So anytime we have an expense that is related to transporting pupils, we get approximately 70 to 75% of that back in the form of transportation aid. It's what's considered an expense-based aid. So we submit to the state what we spent for transportation. So that would be for fuel, that would be for bus parts, that would be for salaries related to our transportation department. And we submit that to the state, and that generates transportation aid. It comes in the form of building aid, so it's not like we have to take those funds and use it for transportation. It's just a mechanism for the state to fund the costs for any district in New York State. And I will point out, too, every district in New York State has a different ratio depending on many, many factors. Sparsity factors, wealth ratio, property values, all come into play when you're looking at the aid ratios associated with transportation.
Thank you.
One more thing on transportation aid before I go off on that, sorry. So our buses right now, and this is again a big mismatch from what the new mandate is, our buses are financed over a 5-year and aided over a 5-year period. We keep them for, like I said, between 8 and 10 years, depending on the bus. We have ongoing maintenance costs associated with them. But these new electric buses, they're going to give a longer period of time for us to finance them and a longer period of time to receive aid back on them. We don't have all the details yet on how this is all going to work, and certainly the cost is going to be sticker shock for not only us but the community if we have to replace 6 buses at a time. That's going to be a lot different than the approximately $1.2 million we're spending on our bus replacement cycle now. You're talking about probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $4.5 to $5 million potentially if nothing changes and it stays status quo from where we are right now.
Melissa, I know that Adam promised you an aid question, so here you go. Can future state aid be applied to the cost of these projects? Do you know?
That's probably going to come back to me as well.
I tried.
Can future state aid be used for this project? I guess the short answer could be yes. So if we look to take some of our existing state aid and say we're going to put that into our debt service budget to help offset the cost, then it's built into there and it's not being passed down to the taxpayer. Again, with the propositions that you saw tonight, we gave the worst case scenario with us not doing that, because the last thing I want to do is promise the community, hey, we're going to take some of our aid increase and put it towards this proposition and then have something happen where we can't do that. So that's why I said during the presentation this is the worst case scenario. We've had conversations about it, but we do not have anything finalized, nor will we before the March 7th vote date.
Okay, this next is a comment/question concern that STEM was not getting more emphasis and was not prioritized over athletic facilities, and questions about what type of STEM offerings are occurring or being improved upon in the district. Kristen, maybe from instruction, and then Casey or Adam, maybe on the other side, financing.
One of the things I'd like to draw attention to, but I'll probably ask Adam to give details on it, is the fact that we did have some significant renovations to our science classrooms here at the high school. You did also see on Proposition 1 some proposals for work for technology rooms at Merton Williams Middle School. So there's absolutely money that we are placing into science and technology. Our math wing has also been recently updated. Being a little bit newer to the district, I'd have to ask Adam to provide some more details on that, those projects that have been past completed. One of the other things to keep in mind is that there are other spaces that would be vacated with all the athletics facilities moving over to a field house. So there are some other spaces that we did not discuss tonight that will be spaces we can use for future instructional programs. And that's one of the reasons that the Office of Instruction is working so closely with the business office in this capital improvement project, knowing that we may have some additional spaces where we can expand some of that work. And we'll be able to dedicate thought process and needs assessment to that if the project does go through on March 7th. But to that end, we've not made those plans just yet because we're not sure what space we may or may not have available.
Also, within the last several years, the district has partnered with Bausch & Lomb to field a robotics team that's been extremely successful. We also have Lego League Robotics at our elementary school. We also have created what's called an Education Now Makerspace. So Makerspace at the high school, at Merton Williams, and in our elementary buildings as well, all align with the STEM curriculum of New York State and provides our students that opportunity. We continue to have curriculums such as Project Lead the Way, which is a engineering curriculum that our students have access to. And as Mrs. Polini mentioned, most of our renovation in the last capital project was in our science area and also leading to STEM improvements throughout the district.
Mark or Eric, do you know how many classrooms were renovated in the science wing?
There were 11 science classrooms at the high school on the second floor, as well as a new chemical preparation room and some ancillary storage spaces.
Okay. Dr. Kocourek, can you talk about the thought exchange that was sent out? The question is, how was that queried? How would people have known to participate? They didn't receive anything at home, and there was nothing put out to the community. They don't feel that 700 people is a community consensus.
So postcards were mailed out to all community members with a link to that thought exchange. Also, the thought exchange was placed on our website, and for individuals who do gain their information from social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, the link to that thought exchange was put out there. It was also in an Insight article. So that information did go out to the community. People were able to receive that if they receive it through the mail. They also were able to receive it if they received their information through technology via the district website.
Okay, we'll take a pause for gratitude again. This person would like to say thank you for supporting our kids so that they can be proud of the schools they attend. Next, Mark Edwards, can you talk about costs and overall operation budget in terms of Fieldhouse and Performing Arts Center, the utilities, maintenance, equipment required? Will this be consistent with the costs we use now? Will it go up? And if so, how much? Understanding that I'll probably shift over to Adam.
Well, the final numbers have not really been calculated. Again, we have not locked in exactly the size or the operational hours of the facilities that we're talking about. We've seen some preliminary schedules tonight, but nothing that we'd be able to put a hard number to at this point. So the analysis has been completed so far is from a cleaning and a maintenance standpoint based on the number of square feet that are serviced by the current cleaners, current maintenance, and current grounds folks on a man hours per 1,000 square feet basis. And then that was then carried forward into the approximate sizes that we've been given for the field house. Staffing will be something we'll have to deal with. Staffing right now, especially on the cleaning roles for the district, has been a difficult position to fill. We have several vacancies. We're still trying to make some gains in that area. Related to the utility piece, again, that is also on a cost per square foot. So we look at all of our utilities every single month and what we spend by contract for the utility, what we pay for transportation of that utility, and then we run that into the cost per square foot for every single building and then the overall district average. And again, we just take that number and apply it to the square footage that's anticipated for the field house, and the number of hours of operation will have an impact on that number, and we haven't really locked that down yet.
Operations. Okay. All right. This next question is for Dr. Kocourek. If you could please justify an expenditure like this in the current economy, thinking about high construction costs, high costs of living, increased taxes, how would that attract more families to our district? Aren't you worried that people will leave? And how does this help with becoming a destination district? Is that the only reason for Proposition 2?
This was a conversation that took place among the long-term planning committee, also with the Board of Education. Really the thought process is where is the economy and what type of impact would this have on the taxpayers? Depending on when you get your information, there was projections of a recession. Now there are also projections that we'll be avoiding a recession. There was also the thought process around the fact that this is a long-range project, so by the time the financing happens for this project, that we would be pulling out of the difficult economic time. The real estate in the district is currently selling very quickly. Individuals are moving into the district. Property values continue to move up. And one of the thoughts are, as we see new construction and new tracks being built, recently there was a group of homes approved on Colomer. We also have different tracks popping up in North Greece, and these are homes that are ranging anywhere from $250,000 to $400,000 as you move into North Greece. So the thought process was, when we look at other districts and we look at what districts offer their students, not only in their educational program but in their facilities, we felt in our discussion that other school districts were providing these facilities that would attract families to moving into these areas. So one of the thoughts was that we could continue to be a destination district by providing these cutting-edge facilities.
Okay, Adam, can you share what would the tax impact be if both propositions 1 and 2 were defeated?
So there'd be no tax impact if Proposition 1 was defeated or passed. As I explained, there's no cost impact. I suppose if it was defeated, we wouldn't be using our capital reserve, which again, that's not going to have an impact on the property tax rate. We could have some debt that falls off that would go away that could impact the property tax rate. So there could be a small decrease associated with that if that doesn't get allocated elsewhere within our operating budget. As far as Proposition number 2, that is all on the tax rate. So if it gets passed, you'll see an increase in the taxes. If it is defeated, then there will be no tax impact because there's nothing that exists there. We're not using a capital reserve, and there's no debt that's coming off the books that we're utilizing towards Proposition number 2.
Okay, hold that microphone, Adam. What will the tax impact be specifically on operating costs and maintenance if the new facilities are put into place and passed? What will tax impact or percentage be moving forward, looking strictly at operating costs?
So again, we haven't had that developed fully yet. I will say that there will be no tax impact in the early years as we're going under construction, other than the costs that we talked about now. We will have to evaluate our operating budget for the things that we discussed earlier, whether it's utilities, cleaning, materials, supplies, etc. We're hoping that we'll be able to absorb those into our existing budget with the increases we receive in state aid in the out years.
Mark Edwards, why would money that was raised in prior projects or through taxes be used to fix or repair facilities that are old and broken? Why wasn't that already done?
I think Adam touched on that on an earlier question when we're talking about the operating costs that are funded through the local share through your normal taxes versus what we're able to include in a capital project where we receive additional state aid.
I'll just add to that. So we obviously have maintenance that takes place every year throughout all of our buildings and districts and all of our systems. So that's why we have boilers that are 30 plus years old, because we have done a really good job in taking care of them. They're just getting now to the end of their useful life, and that the way that state aids you on a capital project, they don't say, do this project and then turn around and put it back into there. It goes into your general operating fund. So in essence, you could look at it as, hey, we have this additional building aid from these prior projects, and that's part of our aid that we receive, and that's helping to offset the maintenance costs in there if you chose to look at it that way. I kind of take a more of a global look at it and just say that it's part of our overall operating budget of the district.
Okay, probably Mark Edwards and Adam again. This person understands this has already happened, but what would happen if this long construction timeline through the end of 2027, all of these projects underway, but then something unexpected happens, an air exchange, a boiler, a roof suddenly needs replacement? Does that happen, and how do you handle it?
I can start on that. So if we had something that arose in emergency fashion, whether a boiler broke down or we had a windstorm and a roof that was blown off, we do have the ability as a school district under New York State law to enter into an emergency project. The way that works is we go out, we get that repaired right away, and we do our best to get the best competitive pricing we can get on that. And then the state will aid you the capital building aid rate the following year. So if something unexpected does come up that is not planned and it's deemed an emergency, we work through the state, and then we make the purchase, and then the state reimburses us the next year. So there's no 15-year, 20-year, 30-year repayment schedule on an emergency like that.
Okay. How can you use upgraded items such as backup generators and boilers when the governor has said no more fossil fuels in any construction by 2025 to 2030? I don't know who should answer that.
Should I do it? Just
Probably.
That's a good question. I have no idea if that is going to go through in the governor's budget. I know that is being challenged on many fronts. I'm not even sure if that is something that is going through for existing buildings. I know that is for new construction, so I don't have a good answer for that one. I'm sorry.
Okay. This has to do with being a business and the fact that we're often referred to as a business. What are we saving by spending $90 million? Have you calculated a cost-benefit analysis? Again, I don't know.
I am not sure that I understand what that question is, so I'm not really sure how to answer it. Read it one more time, maybe it'll come to me.
Okay. You call yourself a business. Specifically, are we saving by spending $90 million? If so, what are you saving? Have you calculated a cost-benefit analysis?
I guess the part that's thrown me off is if we're spending money, how are we saving? That's why I'm not necessarily understanding
that's the
this
question.
Yeah. And so I think that's a self-explaining answer based on the question.
We're going to have a bunch of tax questions, Adam. We're in a recession. How do you justify a dramatic increase in our school taxes with senior citizens who are already having a difficult time paying for medications, food, and other living expenses?
So I think we already talked and covered about whether or not we're in a recession. I think it depends how you look. When we were going through the process, we definitely talked, and there were definitely warning signs that we were going into recession. There was also signs that we were not going into recession. As an example, New York State had record sales tax. Sales tax does get shared as part of the revenue for the district, and we continue to see growth in that, meaning people were still out there spending money. As far as the recession, we had obviously the decline in the stock market. That's kind of gone up and down over the last several years. And so we did look at that. We had conversations about it. And again, if we push this off further because of the potential threat of a recession, costs are only going to increase. That $90 million project may be $120 million, and the $37 million project may have been $47 million. So, we had to make a decision. We're going to put it up to the community for their vote, and then we'll do the best we can to stay within the parameters that we outlined.
Okay, this next question is for Kristen, followed by probably Casey. With Proposition 2 being a want and not a need, how can you explain Proposition 2 to the community in terms of, does it raise test scores? Will it increase graduation rates? Will it help to affect the staff or give them better compensation for retention long-term? More, Mike.
When I think of that at want and a need, it just brought me back to, and I'll let them answer on the test scores and all that. I think back to when we were planning for the artificial surface at LeBeau Field. And when we began the discussion for artificial surface, it was in 2007 when I began in the district, and it was deemed a want and not a need. By the time we approved that project, it was a need. Every other school in Monroe County utilized it. It is a resource for our community that is used throughout the entire year. I really envision this type of upgrade for our kids, our grandkids, and our future cadet community eventually being a need and not a want. It's perspective, and it's timing, and it's really trying to, think about long-range planning and what that is. It's looking into that future and trying to formulate, what might look and feel like a want today in 4 years may be a need. Because when we began talking about a field house in 2010, there was no Pinnacle out in Victor. There was the beginning phases of the Gates Chile. I think they had just opened, so I think it's really gone down that direction. So what might seem like a want today, it's having that forward thought process, knowing that it could be a need later on.
As far as quantifying academic achievement based on these facilities, I think that's probably near impossible. But I think that what folks should consider is the fact that many of our students only come to school. They're driven to come to school, not for the mathematics, not for the English language arts, but for the opportunity to participate in extracurricular activities. Right now, whether we like it or not, or we agree or not, our youth are struggling. There is great social, emotional concern because of many things that are happening in this world. And we have found that through athletics and the fine arts, that students are having a safe place to develop with adults that are trusted so that they can continue to grow and be the best that they can be. I think many people are not always measured on their academic success, that it's the relationships that are built through the performing arts and the coaching. And there is quite a bit of research out there that bases the participation in the fine arts stimulates a student who can achieve higher in the academic realm along with athletics. We found when students are not participating in extracurriculars that they are not achieving as high academically. That's anecdotal, that's qualitative. You may find some quantitative data overall on those theories, but we do not keep data on that correlation as far as being able to answer that question that way. So I can't answer that question because we don't have the quantifiable data to link the facility to student achievement in that way that question was asked.
He took all of my good answers. I think he used my notes, so I concur.
Okay, Adam, have you compared the cost of this project or benchmarked it against other county school districts' capital projects?
I certainly didn't do a comparison of our proposed projects to the other county projects that have been out there. I do have a pulse on what other communities are approving or not approving. I know we had two east side districts that both had pretty extensive capital projects that were defeated. One was defeated by about 30 votes, one was defeated by about 50 votes, and then there's been a handful of projects, including those projects that have had a tax impact that have passed within the county. But I don't compare of this district at Hilton compared to another district and what they're putting out for their capital project, as all districts have different needs.
Okay, Eric, can you talk to us about the design? Looking at the overall square footage, it's not exactly clear how much it is, but this person wants to assume a total of 100,000 square feet. The cost per square foot seems excessive to them. They're comparing it to a YMCA that's building a brand new 74,000 square foot facility for only $22 million. So can you talk about how a project like our field house and performing arts center would compare to something like a new facility at, for example, a YMCA?
I guess I would say that the construction and the contractors that are working on this project have to abide by the state prevailing wage rate, which does cost a little bit more than privately funded building of this size.
Thank you. Adam, if the bids come in lower, will you reduce the burden on the taxpayer?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if the bids come in lower than what we anticipate and we could do all of the work, we are only going to borrow the amount of money that we need. Therefore, inherently, we would have less principal and interest payments and therefore less of an impact.
Great. Dr. Kocourek, can you share why the vote would come a week after this meeting? Shouldn't you have a meeting like this and then push the vote much further out, like a month?
When we sat down and we planned the timeline for this to happen, I guess you could look at it in hindsight and look at the what ifs. And I guess feedback could be taken that this meeting could have happened earlier due to the level of detail and planning just to bring it to this point. The district employees have been working feverishly in bringing this presentation forward. This has been a discussion for a very long time. So we felt that it would be most appropriate in our planning to have an informational meeting as close to the vote as possible so individuals could have the information and then cast their vote and make that decision. So I think there's varying opinions. Some folks would have liked to have this a month ago. Some people have been pleased with the fact that it's close to the date for the vote. That's just a variance in a personal opinion.
Melissa, can you talk about interest rates? What is our rating for our school district, and what interest rate is our debt financed?
So the district currently has a AA- credit rating through Standards & Poor's, one of the main credit rating agencies for municipalities. What was the other portion of that question?
What percent is our debt? Like what?
Against the debt limit?
Yeah. Sorry.
So right now, the district is exhausting about 18% of its current debt limit.
I think I asked that wrong. What's the percentage? Like what?
The interest
what rate? Interest rate? Yes.
Okay. So the interest rates that we've used within the report are very conservative, taking into account where the market is at this point. In the public market today, interest rates range from about a 4% to a 4.5% for serial bond rates. We are including interest rates up to 6% or so, and we've also taken into consideration issuing the bonds through the dormitory state of New York, which is a financial insurance policy that the state has for issuing some financings.
Thank you. And this next question. What happens when an assessment on someone's house goes up? How does this affect them?
So right now, all of our towns are under 100% equalization rate, which means that the value of the home is higher than what they're being taxed on their tax bill. So as the assessors go through a reevaluation on the homes and theoretically put that to what the home's actual value is, the tax rate will drop if our assessments go up. It's an inverse relationship between the two. The tax rate is only a mathematical formula that's based on the levy that's approved by the Board of Education every year. So if assessment values come in higher than what we anticipated, that means the tax rate that we anticipated is going to drop.
Adam, I'm not sure if you have this. I know you do project quite a few years, but what is the projected Hilton Central School District student population through 2035, or perhaps where might someone find that?
I don't have that projection in front of me, so I don't want to give any misinformation, but we do go through that enrollment projection that I mentioned earlier. Those enrollment projections are on the website. If you go under the business office and the 23-24 budget, you will see the enrollment projections and per pupil allocations. It's one document. It'll provide, I don't know if it's going to go all the way out to 2035, but it goes out several years beyond where we are today.
Thank you. Kristen, this person is talking about the community use of the facilities, and they're thinking that the community wouldn't be able to use this freely without it being attached to some sort of program within the facility. So they're saying it's not actually for every taxpayer. Can you talk about how anyone in the community would or maybe would not be able to use this?
So we see this Proposition 2 as a great opportunity to expand our community education offerings. When we look at something like use of the cardio rooms or the fitness center that would be in the field house, we might use something similar to what we do with our Exercise Walkers program, which is community members sign up through Community Ed, but aren't necessarily scheduled to attend on March 14th and March 18th and only these 6 sessions, but rather they get a card that provides them access via a course that they take to acclimate themselves to the facilities, and then they're able to use it during certain hours that are designated or certain days of the week. So we could see, I couldn't just walk in and use it because I live in the community. I couldn't just come in on a Tuesday evening and use it unannounced or unvetted necessarily. But if I were to sign up through Community Ed to be a person that engages in yoga classes that are scheduled, or that engages in a fitness club, if you will, that can have access in the evenings on certain days of the week, I would be able to show my card that says I'm a member of that community education group and then be able to use the facility. Because we would have so much more facility use across our entire district, it would allow us to offer more wellness, more fitness offerings, potentially more large group gatherings and classes as well, because we simply would just have more square footage in which to be able to run those different programs. So from a community education standpoint, we really look at this as a great opportunity to open up our offerings and access and look at things differently than maybe we've been able to offer in the past.
The only thing I'm going to add to that, because that was spot on for the conversations that we had with this, we weren't looking to charge the community to utilize the facility through community education because there's already a tax impact on there. We felt that that would have been a double charge. However, if we had somebody who's coming from outside of the area to utilize the facility, that would incur a charge for that individual.
Adam, can you tell us if a homeowner had a home that was worth more than $200,000, this person believes that that is well below the average home in Hilton, how would they figure out the information and their tax impact?
So when I worked with the 4 assessors, they were the ones that gave me the average home price in Hilton. Actually received something from the county as well with all of the properties within the Hilton School District. When I looked at them, the school taxable amount was 76% of those homes had a value of $200,000 or less. So that's where the information comes from. Yes, if anybody wanted to contact me for a specific, like my home is valued at, $274,000, I would be happy to calculate that. The sliding scale that we provided was meant to kind of give a ballpark range. So if your home was $400,000, you could take the $200,000 and double it. That's kind of the process that we use. But if you'd like to contact me individually, I'd be more than happy to walk you through it.
Thank you. I think anyone can answer this question, but why would you use a college facility as a comparable? That seems unrealistic looking at public education.
I'll start with that one. So we definitely looked at more than a college facility. The reason why we decided to go to Nazareth was because they did not have what's called a brick and mortar type facility. So our architect can certainly get into more of the details around that, but it was a cheaper construction method than doing a full-fledged masonry construction on that. So we wanted to see the design, see what that looked like, see if that would work for us here at Hilton, which is why we visited Nazareth College.
Okay. This next one is looking at capital reserves. If Proposition 1 was approved, wouldn't they see another increase on their local taxes because you would be asking to replenish that?
No. The capital reserve is outside of what's built into our property tax rate. It's not part of our general fund. It's you can look at it as like an external savings account that we can fund if we have operating surpluses, additional state aid that comes in, if our operating budget, utility costs don't come in as high as we projected, or fuel costs don't come in as high as projected, we can take that savings at the end of the year and transfer it into any number of reserves. One of the reserves we have is that capital reserve, but that does not impact taxes one way or the other.
Okay, I'm just making sure we didn't miss any. Okay, last question before we transition. Adam, is there a cost for student breakdown or a per pupil amount for Proposition 2? If there's not, would this person be able to get that information? And the bigger part of this question, I think, would be future answered anyways, but if the current student enrollment were to remain the same for 33 years, how many, this feels like algebra, right? How many students will benefit from this facility, and at what cost per student over 33 years?
So I do not have the numbers in front of me, and nor have I calculated what the future cost per pupil will. There's just so many factors that go into that. However, what I will say is that Hilton has been the lowest cost per pupil among the Monroe County districts for about the last decade plus. And we're not even close to being at the average on that. So that is, depending on the audience, it's a point of pride. If you're a business owner or a community member that is paying taxes, you're happy that we're the lowest in the county. If you're a teacher or an educator or a family that has kids that are going to the district, you may not be as happy. You'd like to see that more around the average. But that is one thing that we track year in and year out. And if you've ever seen one of my budget presentations, you would know that we are the lowest per pupil in the district. Part of that is the makeup of our community. We are still growing. We talked about that. I think we are continuing to be a destination district. So you have other districts that are fully developed that don't have a lot of new construction, nor do they have the space for a lot of new construction. So anytime they have a budget increase, it's being distributed among those residents that are there, and they're having declining enrollment, which is then causing them to have a higher per pupil allocation. So we have been the lowest in the county for a decade plus.
I fibbed. We were going to ask one more just in the vein of not leaving any question out. Casey, can you talk about how you would prioritize something like physical propositions and projects over things like salaries for staff? Why would a field house come before that?
So we have collective bargaining with all of our employees. Currently, all of our associations are under contract. We have worked through the negotiation process with all of those. Our Teachers Association and our school-related professionals are currently under a 5-year collective bargaining agreement. Currently, the only group not under contract, which will be coming up for negotiation, is the administrative team. So as we move forward, in good faith, we have bargained with those units, and we are what we believe paying a fair, they agreed, so they agree that we're paying them a fair wage and compensation package. So that's something that is ongoing outside of capital improvement. So for us to be able to rate a capital improvement versus compensation packages for employees is not something that I would be able to answer that way because they're not really comparable. That's the best way I can answer that question at this point in time.
Okay, that is the end of this phase of questions. So we're going to take a brief transition, and what's going to happen is the 4 tables will be pulled apart. You can give us about 5 minutes just to do that before you come up. And then if you have questions specifically, we will have a district-specific table for questions for Ms. Polini and Dr. Kocourek. We will have a scope of project-specific table, which will be probably where Mark Edwards and the construction group is. We'll also have timeline construction in the same area. Labella campus will be down there. And then we will also have financing way at the end with BPD and Adam. So give us about 5 minutes to pull tables apart, and we welcome you up here to do one-on-one questions.